Hi guys, it's Sophie. So I thought I'd do a video focusing around non-fiction November, really enjoying it this month, and I'm going to be talking about some of the myths about non-fiction and some of the things I hear when I ask if people read sort of any non-fiction at all, and particularly for people who will strictly read sort of fiction. Just to say, if fiction is your thing, has always been your thing, you've tried non-fiction and you really are adverse to it, just knock yourselves out, read fiction. But what I'm trying to do is for those who are maybe skeptics, maybe non-believers in the non-fiction benefits, try and knock down a few of those things that you might have heard about non-fiction that might not necessarily be true. Myth number one, non-fiction is hard. Okay, here's the thing. Some non-fiction is really hard, some non-fiction is really boring. Some fiction is really hard, some fiction is really boring. Books come in a range of difficulty levels. And the reality is, booksellers want to sell books. The non-fiction as a sort of section, as one giant sort of overwhelming genre, if you can call it that, doesn't have to be difficult, and I don't think it is difficult. An awful lot of popular non-fiction is just that, popular science, popular history, and the way in which those books are written make them very readable. Myth number two, non-fiction is basically more schoolwork. It's either what I'm doing in my job or it's what I had to learn at school and I just don't want to be doing that. Now, I completely understand if you are not drawn to exactly the same kinds of books that maybe you're studying or maybe you work within. It can be a little bit sort of overwhelming if you're working in one topic and you go home and you read about that topic too. I get that, and I'm not saying that you have to read the things that relate most closely to you. Sometimes non-fiction, because it's so wide, you can find something you're really interested in that's in a completely different sphere to what you'd normally read about. So here's an example. When I was at university, I was studying astrophysics, and there are a lot of people around me who are also reading science fiction and reading science or physics non-fiction. I couldn't do that. That wasn't my style of thinking. It made me feel trapped and too enclosed in my topic, but I really enjoyed reading memoir. That was something that was completely different, but is still non-fiction. I really enjoyed reading sort of little scrapbooks, bits like, I think it's called The Gossip in the Forest was one of my favourites. So little bits of isolated history around sort of fairy tale and myth, sort of countryside tales, so something completely, again, different to the sort of stringent rigorousness of physics. There are a range of topics within non-fiction, and not all of them are like the things that you studied at school, and not all of them are like the things that you do at work. Myth number three, non-fiction is so impersonal. I can only really enjoy stories. Now, non-fiction is full of stories. You've got memoirs, you've got essay collections, you've even got sort of personal, more textual based stuff that's really got a lot of the author in there. You've got things that sort of explore culture or explore a different group of people, that are often sort of scattered through with these really personal tales about that group. Just because you're telling the story of someone who really existed or exists now doesn't make them more dull than someone who's been made up in someone else's mind. Remember that a lot of fiction is based on the reality of experience. Not all fiction, but a lot of fiction relates to those sort of truths that we do see in our own lives, and non-fiction does that too. I think the other thing to realise is that non-fiction can be written in quite a sort of fictional sort of format. The writing doesn't have to be sort of very stark, very clearly defined. It can be more lyrical, it can be more poetic. I think you'll often find that with more philosophical texts, that they can be really beautiful. I mean, Walden would be an example of a text that is absolutely gorgeous and is non-fiction. Myth number four, fiction's my escape, and non-fiction just drags me back into this reality, and I don't want to read about that. Now, I think our world is varied enough that you can normally find a part of our world that is so far flung from what you've experienced, it reads as fantasy, it reads as escapism. Now, fantasy creatures, you're probably not going to get there, but you could easily read about the history of our biology. You could read about I don't know, sort of giant sloths sort of prancing around in Australia. You could read about lions prowling up and down America. This is non-fiction, but it is fantastical, it is beautiful and weird. I think non-fiction can provide an escape to other possibilities and to other people's view of the world. It can also be sort of mad and really out there, so I think you'd find it really hard to read a popular physics book or a popular even science book. Often physics often plays in a lot, without exploring the possibility of other worlds, without thinking about science fiction within that sort of the multiverse theory, talking about sort of relativity, talking about Schrodinger's cat. Thought exercises in science non-fiction are essentially science fiction. And just because something is true or has a basis in truth doesn't mean that it cannot be completely separate from the reality in which you live, or that by reading non-fiction you're somehow sort of forced to read about what is closest to you. It may be that you are someone who's sitting down today who is only interested in reading about, I don't know, very early Chinese history. Still non-fiction, still fun. And myth number 5, tying in quite closely, I just don't find myself interested in current affairs. There is no need to be interested in current affairs. Let's say your thing is steamy historical romances. I bet you'll be able to find a non-fiction book bringing your 2 sort of favourite fictional characters to life, and looking at the dresses they would have worn or the ways they would have eaten their food, and realising that actually stories like that happen throughout history. Or let's say that you are really into mystery novels and sort of that odd creepiness of a thriller. I mean, I find reading about H.H. Holmes, he was tracked by a detective for months, while this detective knew that the lives of 2 young children hung in the balance of looking for this man who disappeared into the air like fog. And that's fantastic, and has nothing to do with current affairs, has nothing to do with the world that we live in today. Now, I'm not someone who thinks that non-fiction should replace fiction, or that non-fiction is inherently more valuable than fiction, or indeed that everyone should be reading non-fiction. Whilst I want to sort of be promoting it, especially this month, if you feel as though you only want to read fiction, then that is your own prerogative. But I do think it complements it really well. I think that's what I found since I've been reading a lot more of it this year, is that as opposed to it being something which sits completely separate from fiction, you can pair it quite nicely and just really enrich the experience of reading that fiction, and also sort of give yourself a little bit more knowledge than you might have been able to gain from that fictional work. Remember that not many authors sit down and make up their stories, you know, completely without any link to reality. Often they're researched through non-fiction, and if you know you have a world, let's say someone's writing about early human history, they're probably going to want to be reading books about early human history so that they're getting the facts somewhat right. And you may find that there are books that have inspired your favourite novels that you will also love. Now, I hope that you found this entertaining, that for those of you who maybe do think some of the things that I've said are sort of myths within this video have understood sort of my point. And even if you don't want to be reading non-fiction, maybe you can see why others might. Yeah, and hopefully this has been fun for you guys. If there's any other sort of myths that you can think of that you want debunking, then put them down below and I will do my best to debunk in the comments. But I look forward to seeing you all there, and hopefully you are reading many, many exciting things, some of which may have happened to people who actually existed in this world. Alright, I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.